the newsagents.
We will stabilise our economy, clear out the Tory rot, fix the foundation and deliver the mandate of change. A Britain built to last, built with respect, built with pride, because together we have shown that Britain belongs to you. Thank you, conference.
This is the victory lap of Keir Starmer's speech, and the crowd are helping him along. It was the most rousing, possibly the only really rousing moment of an hour-long speech, which flagged in parts but spoke to the importance of service, of politics and service of government. It was Starmer's theme, and he wasn't going to move from it.
It didn't have the optimism and the hope of Blair in '97, but the economic circumstances are very different today than they were then. What Keir Starmer's asking for is patience from the British people for the long-term rebuilding of Britain. I guess the question is, are people in these impatient times prepared to wait for the good times to come? Welcome to the newsagents. It's John.
It's Lewis.
It's Emily, and to take you behind the curtain, we are recording this before we've actually heard the leader's speech. Keir Starmer and his wife Victoria, have just walked through the hall. His speech is about half an hour away, and it is a complicated day for Keir Starmer on many levels, because right here he is the leader of the Labour Party, and he has to set up a vision for his party to take to the country to remind everyone why they voted for that landslide victory. But overnight in Lebanon, we have seen more than 550 dead, 1,500 injured, and it looks like the Middle East is on the brink of all-out war. And so in a very real sense, Keir Starmer's job today is to be the Prime Minister, and he has already lost his Defence Secretary, John Healey, to Downing Street to chair an emergency meeting, a COBRA meeting, about what's happening next.
It sometimes feels like when you're at a party conference, you are in a bubble. And to a certain extent, you are. I mean, look at what the things that have been spoken about. You've been speaking about who's bought who a suit and who's bought someone else a pair of glasses and where did they get free football tickets from, etc. And then you think, well, a regional conflict in the Middle East may be brewing. As Emily says, all those kind of missiles being fired overnight from Lebanon into Israel, Israel striking back, very high casualty numbers. The real world always has a way of intruding on a party conference.
I was thinking about the fact that the last time we were at the Labour Party conference, so last year, because it was taking, for various reasons, taking place a little bit later in October, it was around the time of October the 7th.
Literally was.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I remember us having that conversation then. Says we're in the wrong place here. We should probably be in Jerusalem or Tel Aviv or wherever. And it is it's striking and disturbing that we're a year on. It's again the Labour Party conference, but far from. I mean, obviously we saw the horrors of October the 7th, but far from that conflict receding, it is expanding and it is intensifying and it's amplifying. And it is a reminder that we're talking so much. We've talked quite a bit this week about how the Labour Party or the government, needs to sort of seize the narrative and regain the narrative. It's a reminder that governments struggle to control the narrative just in terms of domestic policy or whatever. This is so far outside anybody's control, even Biden's control. And it could. I mean, if this happens and all-out war does happen, then it is this. Never mind anything about anything that's been announced this week, policy-wise. This is politics. This is news for the next 3 months, for the next 6 months, for who knows how long.
And this is important in and of itself. What is happening in the Middle East and what's happening on the sort of, the southern front in Gaza, the northern front in Lebanon. These are major issues, but they also have ramifications. They've had ramifications for the Labour Party in the general election with, Jeremy Corbyn arguably getting back in and those independents who stood against Labour MPs and nearly unseated Wes Streeting, nearly unseated others. There is a dynamic here that does have an impact in Liverpool as well.
Yeah, and I think it's also a test of the agility of the party leader, of the Prime Minister. We were talking to those very close to Keir Starmer last night about whether, does the old speech get ripped up? Does this become central? If he wanted to make a speech on domestic policy, can he still do that? Or does he have to look further afield? Does he have to be more of an international, a global statesman and start offering his thoughts on what is going on there? We don't know. We're about to find out. And we'll be back here as soon as we've heard that speech in full.
So, in our timeline, Keir Starmer has just spoken. He's just finished. Crowds pouring out, analysing what they thought of the speech. And there was the briefest mention of the situation in Lebanon and the Middle East, and saying that he urges restraint on all sides.
And calling for a ceasefire, which got one of the biggest applause lines of the speech.
Yes, but the main substance of the speech was, look, we've inherited a mess. It's going to take time to rebuild. There are no easy solutions. I'm not going to make glib promises that I can't keep. That's what the Tories did. But we have got a plan, and we will get there given enough time. And that was the theme of the speech.
Yeah, and maybe we should start by going through the policy announcements, because, to be frank, there weren't that many, but they were hard fought and deeply felt. And the first one he started with here in the city of Liverpool was the Hillsborough Law, which will be introduced, he promised, before the next anniversary in April. And essentially it makes anyone in the first line of a tragedy have to tell the truth in that first instance of questioning. It is not just about Hillsborough, it is about any future potential cover-up of any future potential tragedy. It is about making sure that lies cannot be told at the heart of these terrible, terrible events. And I think it was part of a bigger theme, which was Starmer trying to tell us that politics didn't have to be rancid and toxic and sour and working against the people. He used the Hillsborough Law as a way of talking about his, as he says, driving purpose. Just listen to this.
It's work that shows how a government of service must act in everything it does. Our driving purpose, to show to the working people of this country that politics can be a force for good. Politics can be on the side of truth and justice. Politics can secure a better life for your family through the steady but uncompromising work of service. Because service is the responsibility and opportunity of power, the precondition for hope, the bond of respect that can unite a country, bind us to the politics of national renewal. Service doesn't mean we'll get everything right. It doesn't mean everyone will agree. But it does mean we understand that every decision we take together, and that it is our duty to the British people to face up to necessary decisions in their interests.
Essentially, he's saying politics can be for you. It can do good for you. It isn't always the thing that will make you feel bad.
The other policy area that I thought was interesting is this sort of homes for hero idea that, that our veterans, the military kind of servicemen and women who find themselves in dire straits in terms of housing, they will get homes, the carers will get homes. And I think that this was a sort of a kind of, I suspect, relatively inexpensive, but will be popular and welcomed on all sides.
Yeah, I think it was an interesting speech. I think it was probably the weakest of the last three that he's given. I was thinking back to, he actually gave, the last two conference speeches he's done were both very good. He's not known as a brilliant orator, but actually he does have a style. It can be quite quiet. He sort of leans into it, literally, figuratively and literally leans on the lectern, sort of takes the audience into his confidence, speaks quite quietly but authoritatively. He did it in Liz Truss in 2022, was particularly impressive, the critique at that time, the sense of going into government in 2023, that the mission for this speech, we've been talking about all week, was to give a clearer sense of where politics might go under him. And on that, I'm not sure it necessarily actually fulfilled that criteria. It got better as it went on. It warmed up. He had some nice anecdotes, particularly actually about a holiday that he just took in the Lake District over the course of the last year, which is worth listening to.
I took my family to the old cottage where we used to stay as children in the Lake District. We walked up to the cottage, stood outside. It must have looked a little odd. And the couple who live there now, they came out. They were lovely. And when we told them why we were there, they said, well, come inside. Go upstairs, take a walk down memory lane. So we did. Came back outside. We're chatting. And then the woman stopped suddenly and said, someone's nicking your car. And I said, no, that's the police moving the car. And that really confused her. Anyway, at this point, her husband comes in and he says, you haven't clocked, have you? He's the leader of the opposition, a politician. And she stopped, smiled, laughed, and said politely, if I'd known you were a politician, I'd have pushed you down the stairs when I had the chance.
But in terms of the kind of overall, going back to that sort of overall theme, his strongest sections, I think by far, were about when he was actually trying to say something about himself and about his own politics. He had a good section on how his politics is different to his opponents, on a critique of populism, something that he calls called the politics of easy answers, right? Where he says that the difference between himself and his mode of government and style of politics is that he is the teller of hard truths, that he is the guy who makes hard choices while those around him, and he clearly has Farage in mind for this, and has in mind whoever takes over as Conservative leader, quite possibly Robert Jenrick, giving you false ideas, false choices, what he called lies and a charade. That was strong because it was saying something about himself and saying something that is distinctive about his government, which is not something that has been said a lot at this conference, because a lot of the theme of this conference has actually been, guess what, we in the Labour Party, we quite like nice things. We like growth. We want to make sure that there are more opportunities for everyone. These are bromides. What was good about that section is he was saying something that was distinctive about himself versus his opponents, but there probably, in my view anyway, wasn't enough of it.
I thought that was quite an easy hit for him. He talked about the rioters and he called them out as racists. In other words, not people who really cared about immigration, which he said was a legitimate concern that many people in the country had, but people who just wanted to make life unpleasant for asylum seekers in the interest of their own bigoted racism. And that got a standing ovation on the floor. And then he kind of repeated it in a different form of words and got another standing ovation. And then he kind of went back and said it one more time. And I thought, honestly, you're just playing to a room full of people who are all feeling really happy that they're not racist. And I'm not sure it got us any further than that. I thought it was, yes, he was leaning into sort of finding the opposition, if you like, finding the Farages, finding the populists, all the rest of it. But I thought it was a pretty easy hit for him there.
Well, maybe, although I suppose we should say that not all political leaders have called out these people as racist, including some people who, might soon be quite senior in the Conservative Party, right? So yes, I mean, one would hope that it would be a bare minimum that the Prime Minister would call some of these people out as racist scumbags, because they are.
I mean, he didn't actually talk about the immigration issue more widely. It is a sort of truism that Labour's very good at saying what they're not, but it didn't really say, this is how we're going to tackle immigration.
I'm going to slightly disagree there. I thought one of the most powerful bits of the speech, which I thought was very effective, was he said, look, if we're going to have an argument about net migration, we've got to be able to tackle illegal migration and accept that some of the people that are illegal immigrants might actually get asylum. He was talking about, if we want more prison places because we want to crack down on crime, well, you're going to need more prisons. If you want to have a welfare state, well, then we're going to have to clamp down on benefit fraud. And I thought that he was making these arguments about, if you want to generate more electricity, grown-up politics, you've got to have more electricity pylons, you're going to have to build more houses if you want to tackle homelessness and make home ownership affordable. And I kind of thought that was on the side of common sense, about that we haven't heard a lot of. And I think that distinguished him from a lot of what has gone before, of easy answers, easy solutions. And you look at the state of public services today and think, my God,
I think there was a nod to Corbyn in that as well, when he said it's easy, to make a crowd cheer. Can't remember the exact line, but he sort of talked about, it's easy to make a crowd cheer, but that's not actually how you run a country.
Yeah, but I suppose then this is the great bet of the Starmer premiership, right? Which is that here's a man who believes in showing not
yes.
telling.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
He's all trousers and no mouth.
what a bizarre image.
Okay, let's just pause for 10 seconds there while we just picture that.
Yeah, exactly. But he is that sort of politician. He believes that if he can, this horrible verb that gets used all the time, deliver, then that itself will be enough. And I suppose the great bet of his premiership and whether it will be a success or not, well, there's two bets. One is whether actually you can deliver and whether they have the ideas to deliver. There's a big question mark over that. The other is whether it is enough. Whether in the age that we're in, in the age that we're in, when actually there are easy answer peddlers out there, and by the way, they do it really well. They're very good at spinning a yarn. They're very good at knitting together a narrative.
And their ground game is getting better all over the country.
And their ground game is getting better each and every month that goes by. Whether actually showing and not telling is enough, as indeed you can argue Biden has found in the United States in many, many ways he has delivered.
He did deliver, and he didn't
been
have the story.
Enough. And that is what I would worry about about Starmer and the Starmer premiership, because he is not good at, as we've seen all week, at knitting those narratives together, at telling a story.
Well, one of his critiques in the speech was about, the performative nature of Conservative politics, that they would say that they're the great party of law and order but didn't build enough prisons. They would say that they were on the side of this and then never delivered. He believes that delivery in itself is enough. What he needs to do is to be able to tell a story a little more clearly. And I know that kind of goes to the performative politics that he wants to move against. On the other hand, I think that the communication skills need to be there.
In a different trade, he comes across actually as this really nice, reasonable guy who wants to be in service, who needs to repair trust in politics, who worries about his sister as a care worker and clearly wishes that she had the same respect as he commands as Prime Minister, but who would prefer actually not to be in the front line of the public-facing stuff, who'd like to go away now, sit in his office and do it all, right? You almost get the sense of he'd prefer somebody else out there being the front man and leaving him to just get on with the job.
There was one very effective bit of politics, actually, though, in terms of taking on the Farage. And I thought it was very interesting. This was a speech clearly that had Farage and reform in mind, hence the big emphasis on immigration. There was a bit where he is talking about the idea that the sorts of voters, older voters who are concerned about immigration, are naturally more statist. They want control. There's a whole section about how Labour will give you back control. We're the party of taking back control, taking on that vote leave mantra. They believe that they can drive a wedge between Farage, who is a libertarian in many ways, and those sorts of voters who want a strong, powerful state. That is going to be a dynamic of politics in the coming year.
Well, we're joined now by the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, who's just been in the hall listening to the speech as we have. And it was noticeable, Wes, that probably the most rousing bits, the bit with the biggest standing ovation, was the section on, I don't know if you call it immigration, or I don't know whether you'd call it the rioters, but Starmer called out those rioters in the summer as racist thugs. And the audience liked it so much he did it twice, or maybe even 3 times. They know they're not racist. He was playing to the crowd. But it didn't take us any closer to an actual immigration message from Labour, did it? What should that now look like once you've said people are allowed to care about their borders?
Oh, see, that's why I slightly disagree. I thought there was a really strong immigration message, and you're right that he called out the mindless thuggery we saw for what it was, because when you've got people doing Nazi salutes at the cenotaph, when you've got people setting a hotel on fire knowing that it's full of asylum seekers, that is just racist, and he was unequivocal in calling it out. But he was also really clear about the fact that there are legitimate concerns about immigration, and that people who have those concerns are not racist and were not rioting.
But that's where I'm picking up with you.
And that's where I thought, both in terms of, boats and small boat crossings, but also our over-reliance on overseas workers in key sectors of our economy. There you've got the pillars of an immigration policy that people can have trust and confidence in, that tackles people smugglers, but also works through our skills system to train and develop our own homegrown talent, so we are not as over-reliant on overseas workers as we currently are. And
do you want immigration to go down?
Yeah, that's
significantly.
That's the clear direction of travel.
By how much?
We want to see is to reduce net migration.
By how much?
Well, I'm not going to set an arbitrary figure, but let me give you an example. In health and social care, I know that we have got an over-reliance on workers from overseas in our health and social care services. And that's a risk because there is a global shortage of healthcare workers. It is also, in some cases, irresponsible and immoral because we often recruit health and care workers from countries with severe shortages of our own. And it's also unfair because we've got people in our own country who love those opportunities. Oh, I'm not going to set arbitrary targets. I'm definitely not going to set new immigration policy because I will end up being confronted by the woman I can see on the TV screen there, who is the Home Secretary, whose job it is to manage immigration. So I'm not setting policy for the Home Secretary.
Okay, but do you believe that there are British workers who are just dying to be working care homes? Because isn't the experience that there are all sorts of jobs that it's very hard to get Britons, maybe because of pay, maybe because it's unglamorous, maybe because people don't want to empty bedpans and the like, that you can't get them to do those jobs?
Well, that's the link to the other part of the Prime Minister's speech, where he talked about his sister being a care worker and wanting her to be able to walk into a room with the same level of respect given to her that is given to her brother, the Prime Minister.
Do you think he feels guilty that he's Prime Minister and she's a care worker? I don't know if you heard something very personal in that bit.
Oh, I mean, I think people can now see how much he loves his family and how proud he is of his family, but also how his own political priorities and his values are guided by his lived experience, not just the lived experience of growing up in a very ordinary working class family, but the lived experience now, the differences in lived experience that he will have because he went into the legal profession, became our country's chief prosecutor and is now the Prime Minister. And the answer and the link of social care to the conversation we're just having on net migration is we will only be able to recruit and retain homegrown talent in social care if we build a genuine social care profession and if we pay our care professionals the wages they deserve. And so as the social care secretary, it is my responsibility to make sure we build that real social care profession.
And how much of this speech was driven by the performance of reform in the general election, where they came second in a very large number of Labour seats, I think around 90. The estimates say that they could gain an extra 50 seats in the next general election. They're building a better ground game, and 34 of those could be Labour constituencies that are vulnerable to reform.
Well, I do think that what we're seeing on the right of British politics at the moment is a potential realignment. And we haven't had a period of major party realignment in this country for 100 years. I think there is every chance that Reform could replace the Conservative Party as the right-wing alternative to Labour in the country. But I think the Prime Minister today with his speech, yes, he absolutely held the Conservatives to account because since the general election, sorry seems to be the hardest word. They have not apologised for the abysmal failure and the record of their government. But to be honest, the Prime Minister wasn't really talking about the other political parties today in his speech. He was talking about the big challenges facing the country, and he made an appeal to people. I think he's been a unifier in the country. The electoral coalition that he built was broad, and it included people who've never voted Labour.
But to John's point, this is a figure from Luke Chill, More in Common. Isn't it a problem if you just assume that Reform is coming for the Conservatives, as opposed to understanding that Reform voters will come for Labour seats as well if you don't deliver? And maybe if you do deliver.
Well, we're certainly not complacent, and one of the hallmarks of this team that the Prime Minister's built is that we know that votes aren't owned, they are earned. And we haven't yet won a single vote at the next general election. We've got to earn people's trust at every election, and we will do that at the next general election if we repay the trust they placed in us at the last election with real delivery.
Keir Starmer said in his speech that take back control was a Labour argument. In the NHS, take back control seems to be stop people smoking in pub gardens and being quite prescriptive about what people can do. Is that where you want to be?
It's interesting. That's the link you made coming out of the speech. I mean, I think without spiking my own speech tomorrow morning, I think I'll be setting out more of what the Prime Minister's reform agenda in health and care is about. And for me, it is about, and for him, it is about health service reform and public health reform. because unless we take action now for the long term, let alone the immediate crisis facing us, and we will end up being battered and potentially shipwrecked by a perfect storm of a growing ageing society, rising levels of chronic disease, and therefore rising cost pressures, which threaten to bankrupt the NHS. So on one shoulder, I've got The Guardian. He'll say, love what you're saying on prevention, but drop this public service reform agenda. And on the other shoulder, I've got the Daily Mail saying, love what you're saying about health service reform, but can you drop the nanny state? The Guardian and the Daily Mail are half right and half wrong. We've got to do both.
But leadership is where you come in. Will your government tell people how to live healthier lives, even if they don't want to?
I don't believe in doing things to people. I believe in doing things with people. And if we are serious about delivering the health mission of this government, we can't do it without active government, but active government can't do it alone. We've got to mobilise business, civil society, and all of us as citizens to make sure that we're not just living longer, but we're living well for longer, and that with a healthy society we can drive a healthy economy and vice versa.
Would you like to see smoking banned in pub gardens?
I am concerned about smoking in this country. I'm concerned about second-hand smoke. We'll be publishing our tobacco and vapes bill shortly, look, I'm up for the debate on that. I really am, because I.
So yes, you do want to support.
I'm up for the debate. We're going to consult. Obviously, we always consult on these sorts of matters. But I'm absolutely
Wes,
up for the debate.
Before you go, can we ask you about Quadrature? You'll be familiar with the company. It's based in the Cayman Islands, which is a tax haven, and they gave, I think it was £4 million to Labour just before the election. I think it's the 6th largest donation in British political history. Are you content with a company that is based in a tax haven, that has shares in oil and in arms, donating to the Labour Party, when you talk about recreating trust for the British public?
The honest answer is I'm not familiar with the company or the issue, so I can't be much help to you on that one.
It's in the Electoral Commission. It was a £4 million donation.
Which is not the answer you ever want to give on a media round, but in this case, it has the virtue at least being the honest answer.
You haven't heard of it at all?
No, so I'd have to go away and look at it. I don't feel confident commenting without knowing the detail. Sorry about that.
And just one other.
Doesn't happen to me often.
Okay, on one other, Sue Gray.
Now this is where I do have strong views.
Well, what should happen to the people that are leaking information about her salary, who are ringing up journalists, who are giving pictures to the Daily Mail? Doesn't Keir Starmer need to take a grip? We spoke to Tom Baldwin, Keir Starmer's biography, yesterday. He said they need to be fired.
Well, and I think if the Prime Minister can't stand leaks, briefing, any sort of self-indulgent personality politics, he's got no time for it and he won't tolerate it. He'll have zero tolerance. But I tell you what really...
What does zero tolerance mean? Firing people?
I think if people are leaking and briefing, I know as a member of Keir's cabinet, if I brief against my colleagues or I leak from the government, I'd be out on my ear.
So those people who did that should be out on their ear.
I think so. But let me just say something about this more generally, because to be honest, I don't think the public care much about all this personality politics stuff, but I do want to say, as someone who works closely with both Sue Gray and Morgan McSweeney and that team in Number 10, we are so lucky to have them. Sue Gray is someone who has given years of service to this country in public service. She's someone who knows Whitehall inside out, and I can pick up the phone to and get things done.
And you'd be devastated if she left.
Absolutely. Morgan McSweeney is one of the best political strategists on the left anywhere in the world. He was integral to Keir Starmer's victory in the Labour leadership election, integral to Keir's victory at the general election. We are so lucky to have them both, and I can honestly tell you, any time I've escalated an issue up to Number 10, inevitably to Morgan and Sue, not once have I ever known them to give me a different contradictory answer, a difference of opinion, and I know how much they like and respect each other. So, sometimes you read the papers and you think, oh no, how have they found out about that? Oh, you don't want your dirty washing in the papers. But on this occasion, on this sort of set of stories, I read the papers and just think, like, this just doesn't resemble my experience of working with Number 10.
So Wes, what the hell is going on?
I don't know, and I don't think we should waste too much time speculating about the kind of trivial self-indulgence of others.
It's corrosive.
Yeah, but it's annoying. But then the Prime Minister comes along and delivers a visionary speech like that with a real plan and shows his grit and his steel and the fire in his belly, and he reminds us what's really important and the change that we now have the opportunity to deliver, because Keir Starmer changed the Labour Party. And I think what we've seen as Labour Party members over the last 4 years or so of coming to conferences is his steel and his grit and how he's changed the Labour Party. And now they see the steel and the grit, and he's going to change our country.
Wes Streeting, thank you very
Great
much.
to talk to you both.
Lovely to talk to you.
Where's Lewis Goodall?
He's
Standing
rubbish.
by.
Well, at least I got the A-team.
This time. You never know.
He's going to get me next time. Look at his face. Look, he's writing it down.
Well, that is pretty much it from the Labour Party conference for us for another year. There is a day tomorrow, but I think it's fair to say, generally speaking, the energy goes out of us a little bit with the leader having made his speech. And of course, it is not the end of conference season, because we've got the Conservatives to look forward to next week.
Well, look, it was weird enough being here and Labour in government with all the kind of civil servants and everyone. It will be even weirder, I think, next week. A rump Conservative Party, a leadership contest still going on, and the sense of them having shrunk so much, literally and figuratively, in terms of size, in terms of prestige, in terms of power, will be quite something.
We think we might have a lot of room at the Conservative Party conference, because I'm not sure how well attended it will be. The line we heard from Keir Starmer was that this was the most attended Labour conference ever. And next week we've got this strange spectacle of a conference without a leader, an outgoing leader, 3 or 4 sort of hankering after the top job, and we will be hearing auditions essentially for that job rather than a set piece.
But normally, of course, the sort of chaos, sclerotic nature of the Conservative Party would make this party very happy, the Labour Party. The thing that I've been most struck by, just sort of thinking, sort of summing up this slightly strange conference, is the extent to which I was talking to a SPAD, ministerial aide last night, and echoing something I've heard from a lot of people over the course of the last few days, who said, you always say, you have these conversations here, how's your conference going? What do you think of it all? And they were like, it almost feels like we've been in office for like 6 or 7 years. That's the kind of energy of the thing, rather than the kind of jubilation, the buoyancy that you might expect.
It's 2001, not 1997.
Or even 2002, or 2004. I mean, and that's weird. And I've been trying to get my head around it as to why I think that is. I think at least one of the reasons is that it all comes back to something we have talked about on this show a lot, about Keir Starmer and the moment he finds himself and the sort of politician he is, which is and we heard it a lot in the speech, which is Keir Starmer has big diagnosis. He talks a lot about what a state Britain is in, a really big sweeping analysis as to how we got to this point, which he says is terrible. But he has a diagnosis, but not much of a prescription. And he hasn't, throughout the course of this week, really established or laid out exactly, in terms of policy prescription to address that illness, that malaise, what it is going to be. There is a sense, I think, sometimes with Starmer and Starmerism of it's almost like being diagnosed with cancer and then given a herbal tea. There is a mismatch, it is an incongruity between the scale of the problem he says Britain is facing and actually what he is suggesting in terms of solving those
I disagree
problems.
with that. I think he's got a very, very strong sense of the prescription, but weirdly, we're just not allowed to hear about it yet until after the budget.
Well, perhaps. I mean, and as we talked about yesterday, there is a problem in not having the budget. But if we think about what is the prescription? It is he wants to get the highest growth of the G7. That is a big ambition. Okay, we've had planning reform, which is important, but sovereign wealth fund, which is about £8 billion, when you compare to the other sovereign wealth funds, which are in the trillions of pounds, changes in terms of some regulation and things like that. These are not big ideas. These are not big visions. These are not big changes. And in terms of, I think, why there is not much energy here, or less energy than you might expect, I think it is because there is a lack of sense of forward momentum of where the Labour Party is trying to get to. That is where the excitement comes. What is going to come in year 2, year 3, year 4? And that hasn't really been here this week, and Keir Starmer didn't really lay it out today.
We will be back tomorrow with more.
More what?
More. Just
More
more.
of us.
More of everything.
More.
Bye from Liverpool.
Bye-bye.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.